They kicked me out of the house on my mother's birthday. No explanation, no warning, just, you need to leave before the guests arrive. I stood on the front porch holding the cake I baked, while laughter echoed inside. It wasn't the first time they humiliated me, but something about today felt final. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with an anonymous message. They're hiding something from you. I almost deleted it, almost. But that text became the match. One phone call later, I uncovered a secret that shattered everything they built. They made me leave, but I wasn't leaving quietly. My mother's birthday party looked like something out of a magazine. String lights hung perfectly over the garden patio. White roses overflowed from crystal vases, and a private quartet played near the fountain. Every corner was polished, every guest dressed to impress. I arrived early, because that's what was expected of me, wearing a simple navy dress that I had ironed the night before. No makeup team, no professional hair, just me and a homemade chocolate cake I spent hours perfecting. Inside, the house buzzed with movement. My mother floated from guest to guest, like a queen, wearing a floor-length gown I'm sure Brittany picked out for her. Brittany always knew what made Mom look powerful. I placed the cake on the serving table and began arranging plates, utensils, folding napkins into swans. No one told me to do it, but they never had to. Ashley, can you move those wine glasses? You're blocking the view of the flower arch, Mum called across the room, not even making eye contact. I nodded and shifted them quietly. No thanks, no smile. A woman I didn't recognise leaned over and whispered, "Aren't you the eldest?" I smiled politely. "Why aren't you sitting at the main table?" Before I could answer, Mum passed behind her and laughed, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Oh, Ashley! She likes being behind the scenes, always has." The woman looked confused. I just kept folding napkins. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I was used to it, but my throat tightened anyway. Brittany arrived, late, as usual, in a glittering silver jumpsuit that made half the room gasp. She was escorted by a man I hadn't seen before, probably her latest boyfriend. They kissed in front of everyone, and Mum clapped like a teenage girl at prom. I stood in the back, clutching a champagne flute that had been empty for 30 minutes. Then came the moment. My mother stood up, tapped her glass and said, "Thank you all for coming. Before dinner begins, I'd like to ask Ashley to excuse herself. We've got everything covered." She said it like a joke, but her eyes told me otherwise. Sharp, cold. I blinked. "Excuse myself?" She waved a hand. "You've done enough, dear. Go relax." The guest laughed. My stomach flipped. I walked out the front door in silence, shoes clicking against the marble steps. I didn't even say goodbye. The night air was cooler than I expected. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed. One message. No name. "They're hiding something from you." I stared at it. My first instinct was to block the number, but something in me paused. I looked back at the glowing windows of the house, where laughter erupted again, and for the first time, I didn't feel shame. I felt suspicion. I drove to a quiet overlook a few blocks away and sat with the engine off. Memories returned, uninvited. I remembered the scholarship letter I received at 17. Full ride, Ivy League. I cried reading it. Mom didn't. She said, "That's sweet, but we can't afford to let you go. Who's going to help me with your sister while I work?" I gave up the offer. Brittany, 3 years younger, got a trust fund and a one-way ticket to Paris when she turned 18. I remembered baking cookies to sell at school while Brittany got a new iPhone every Christmas. I remembered hearing her call me a glorified babysitter in one of her Instagram lives. She still doesn't have a real job, she said, laughing with her followers. Maybe one day she'll stop trying to be the family martyr. I used to cry over those things. Not anymore, not tonight. Back at the party, I returned to grab my jacket. On my way through the hallway, I ducked into the guest bathroom. That's when I heard them, voices just outside the door. You sure she got the message? It was my stepfather, calm, calculated. She'll be gone by the time the guests leave, Mom answered. You think she suspects? There was a pause. She's too broken to suspect anything. After tonight, she'll be out of our lives for good. My chest went still. My hand trembled as I clutched the doorknob. I waited until their footsteps disappeared down the hall. I stepped out unnoticed and slipped out the back door. Back in my car, I stared at my phone again. That message, that text. It wasn't just paranoia. They were hiding something from me. And suddenly, I knew. I wasn't going to run anymore. I was going to find out exactly what they were afraid I'd discover. The day after the party, I returned to the house, not for reconciliation, for evidence. I knew the security code, still my birthday, ironically. The house was empty. Mom and Brittany had gone to a charity brunch. I stepped inside, the air still smelling like wine and roses from last night. I walked through the aftermath, half-empty glasses, napkins with lipstick stains, and plastic utensils in a silver trash bin. I picked up a champagne flute and set it back gently. Then I heard it, her voice, still ringing in my head. She's too broken to suspect anything. The words repeated like a curse. I made my way to the living room where the fireplace mantel was covered in framed photos, all of them of Brittany. Brittany in ballet, Brittany in Paris, Brittany with Mom, no trace of me, not one. The front door creaked open. I froze. Oh, Ashley, you're still here. My mother's voice held no surprise, only irritation. I forgot my jacket, I lied. She walked past me, heels clicking against the hardwood. You should have called. I would have left it outside. We're a little busy today. I can see that. My voice was steady. Then, out of nowhere, she snapped. Honestly, Ashley, when are you going to stop being a burden? You think the world owes you something just because you had a rough childhood? Grow up. Brittany stepped in behind her, laughing. Maybe if you spent half as much energy fixing your life as you do playing the victim, people would actually like you. I looked at them both, calm, detached, like I was staring at strangers. Later that night, back in my small apartment, I stared at the ceiling. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. I found something. He's not your real dad. I have proof. Attached, a grainy photo from the late 80s. My mother, younger, standing next to a man I'd never seen before. She was pregnant. The man had kind eyes, gentle hands placed on her belly. Who are you? I typed back. It's Dylan. We went to high school together. I work at County Records now. I thought you should know. My hands trembled as I zoomed in on the image. The man had a wedding band. So did my mother. My stepfather never wore a ring. I dug through my closet, found an old photo album Mom had forced me to take when I moved out. Most pages were empty. One, tucked in the back, had the same photo, except someone had cut the man out. My heart raced. Why would she hide this? The next morning, I visited the bank. I remembered a savings account Mum opened in my name when I was 10. She told me it would be for college one day. Maybe there was still hope. "I'm sorry, Mum," the banker said. "There's no account under your name." The original account was closed 5 years ago. Funds were transferred to a Barbara Langley. That was my mother's legal name. I walked out of the bank with my fists clenched. It wasn't just manipulation, it was theft. That night, I saw Brittany post a story on Instagram, her sipping champagne at the Burj Khalifa. "Self-care, baby," she wrote. "Grind now, rest in Dubai." I stared at the screen, then at the email confirmation I found 2 weeks ago, an automatic savings transfer that I set up for my first job. It had been going into that same account until it was closed, my money, my future. Now her vacation. I didn't cry. I opened the closet where I stored my mother's old letters. I had kept them all, even though they made me sick. Part of me still wanted to believe she once loved me. Inside an old shoebox was a thick envelope, unopened, yellowed with age, addressed to Barbara Langley with no return address. Curious, I opened it. The letter inside began, "I've tried for years to reach you. I don't even know if this will get to you, but I need to know, is my daughter still alive?" My breath caught. I never agreed to disappear from her life. You left with no warning, took her from me. I've hired lawyers, but they say you're untraceable. If you see this, please just let me know if she's okay. Signed, Daniel M. Carter. I checked the date. It was postmarked 1990. I was born in 1989. The envelope also contained legal documents. A marriage certificate between Daniel Carter and Barbara Langley, filed 1988. Divorce never finalised. They were still legally married when I was born. My mother had lied to everyone, not just me. My stepfather might not have been her husband at all, at least not legally. The room spun. Everything I thought I knew twisted. My memories, my loyalties, my identity, all unstable. In that moment, I wasn't sure who I was, but I knew who I needed to find. I grabbed my phone and searched. Daniel M. Carter. The first result, a criminal defense attorney in San Francisco. My fingers hovered. I pressed call. I met Daniel at a coffee shop near the Embarcadero, far from anyone who might recognize me. He looked exactly like the man in the photo, older now, with salt and pepper hair and soft lines around his eyes. But the resemblance between us was uncanny. He stood up when I walked in as if he'd been waiting his whole life for this meeting. "You're Ashley?" he asked gently. I nodded, unsure how to breathe. We sat. He didn't waste time. "I tried to find your mother for years. She disappeared one day. Pregnant. Without a word. I didn't even know if you survived." I swallowed hard. "She told me my father died in an accident before I was born. She never mentioned you." His hands trembled slightly as he reached into his coat and pulled out a folder. I kept everything. Letters returned, unopened, court filings. I never stopped looking. I opened the folder, copies of certified letters, affidavits, even a missing persons report. I thought maybe she moved to another state, maybe changed her name, but now here you are. My throat tightened. Why now? Why contact her again after all these years? I didn't, not recently. That letter you found was from the last time I tried. I'd given up. And what made you answer my call? He looked at me for a long time. Because you sounded like someone trying to reclaim her life. And you're not the first woman I've defended who had to fight her own family to do it. I asked him if he'd be willing to take a DNA test. He didn't hesitate. We sent in the samples that afternoon. 2 days later, the results came in. 99.9% parental match. I was his daughter. He called me, voice thick with emotion. "You're my blood. You're my daughter." And then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "There's something you should know. I come from a long line of attorneys, prestigious, sure, but with a legacy to uphold. I'm the last male heir. I never married again, never had other kids." I didn't understand what he was saying at first. "You're the only one left to inherit what I leave behind, the estate, the firm, the legacy, everything." My world tipped sideways. The girl who was told she'd never amount to anything was now the heir to one of the most powerful legal families in the state. And then, just as I was beginning to stand up on solid ground, Daniel said something that shattered me all over again. "I found something in your mother's old medical records from the time she disappeared. I'm sorry, but you need to know." I waited. She attempted to terminate the pregnancy, but it didn't work. My heart stopped. "She tried to get rid of me?" He nodded slowly. "But you survived." I left that coffee shop in a daze. I didn't tell anyone where I was going next. I needed time. I needed quiet. That night, I sat alone in a corner cafe drinking tea with shaking hands. I hadn't told my mother I knew, I hadn't told Brittany, but I could feel something in the air, like a current had shifted. As I left the cafe and walked down the dim street toward my car, I heard footsteps behind me, fast, heavy. I turned too late. Pain exploded in the back of my skull. I hit the pavement. The world spun, then faded to black. When I came to, I was in a hospital room, IV in my arm, head wrapped. A nurse sat beside me, eyes kind. "You were found unconscious near the docks," she said. "We're keeping you overnight for observation." The police came. I tried to explain, tried to tell them someone attacked me. They were polite but detached. "We received documentation from your mother," one officer said. "You've had a history of delusional thinking." My jaw dropped. "What? That's not true." "She provided a psychiatric evaluation from a Dr. Kemp, stated you've had recent breaks from reality." My voice cracked. "I've never even met that man." They nodded, unconvinced. Later that night, the nurse came back. She leaned in close. "I don't believe them," she whispered, "and I think you should see this." She handed me a USB drive. "We've got security cameras on that block. Our staff review them for liability. This was deliberate." When she left, I plugged the drive into my laptop. There it was. A man in a hoodie, following me, waiting until no one was around. He struck me from behind, then removed the hoodie. My stomach twisted. It was Brittany's boyfriend, the one from the party, the one Mum called such a sweetheart. I copied the footage and labelled it. Then I opened a secure messaging app and contacted a friend from college, now an editor for an independent news channel. "This is Ashley Langley," I typed. "I have a story you'll want to hear." I attached the video, and then I opened my phone, scrolled through my contacts. One more call to make. One person who could help me finish what they started. I dialed and waited for Daniel to pick up. Daniel didn't hesitate. The moment I told him everything, the attack, the hospital, the false diagnosis, he flew in from San Francisco. He walked into my apartment like a storm wrapped in silence, carrying papers, a laptop, and an energy I hadn't seen in anyone who claimed to be family. That night he posted a photo of the two of us, me with a bandage on my head, him holding my hand, on every one of his professional profiles, LinkedIn, Facebook, even Twitter. My daughter, Ashley Carter, hidden from me for 36 years, not anymore. The internet responded faster than I expected. Messages poured in, some from strangers who saw themselves in my story, others from journalists, lawyers, and old acquaintances. Most surprising was a call from a former housekeeper who worked for my family over a decade ago. Her voice trembled. I always knew something was wrong, but I didn't have proof. Your mother, she had 2 birth certificates. One for you, one for someone named Rebecca Langley. Gin, I saw her burn one in the sink. My throat dried. Would you be willing to testify? I'll do more than that, she said. I'll sign an affidavit. That woman made me lie too many times. The next morning, Daniel's legal team moved fast. A private investigator joined the effort. We set up encrypted file storage, opened a case timeline, and catalogued every document I'd collected. Photos, letters, financial statements, medical records. One file stood out, a trail of monthly deposits from a trust account labelled DC Law Family Fund, paid directly to Barbara Langley for over 10 years. The description, Support for Child, Ashley Carter. Wait, I asked, pointing at the screen. That's the money she got to raise me? Daniel nodded. It was supposed to ensure you had the best: education, healthcare, stability. Instead, that money disappeared. The PI cross-referenced those deposits with local property purchases. One match popped up. The house my mother lived in, the one Brittany now claimed as her own, was paid in full 3 months after the first deposit. That's blood money, I whispered. My father gave her that house to raise me, and she used it to shut me out. Daniel placed a hand on my shoulder. Then it's time we take it back. We didn't go to the police first. We went to the press. The independent news channel that received the attack footage had already started running my story. Their headline hit hard. Daughter gaslighted by family, lies, fake diagnoses, and stolen legacy. The footage of Brittany's boyfriend striking me played on a loop. The emails between my mother and a so-called therapist, actually a friend from her tennis club, were exposed. Fake diagnoses, forged signatures. The story spread like wildfire. Comments exploded. This is every scapegoat child's nightmare. Her mum should be in jail. Where can I donate to her legal fund? But I didn't want donations. I wanted justice. Daniel's legal team filed an injunction against my mother to freeze all accounts under her name and to subpoena all financial records going back 20 years. The court granted it within 48 hours. Bank accounts were flagged. A forensic accountant followed the money trail. That's when the real damage unfolded. Not only had my mother diverted child support funds into her own real estate investments, she had opened 3 additional accounts under Brittany's name, funded by the same trust. Brittany had been spending my inheritance for years, living lavishly on the back of my erasure. That night, I stood outside the gates of the house I once called home. The same gates that closed on me during my mother's birthday. I looked up at the windows glowing with warm light. Inside, they were still pretending everything was fine. but the world outside knew the truth now. Daniel walked beside me, silent. I turned to him. "We don't knock." He raised a brow. "Then what?" "We end it, publicly, in front of every single person they tried to deceive." He nodded slowly. "Are you ready?" I exhaled. "They took everything from me, but they forgot one thing." "What's that?" "I remember who I am now." Later that evening, we held a press conference. Daniel announced a full legal suit against my mother and Brittany for fraud, identity tampering, and misuse of trust assets. He introduced me as his rightful heir, the future managing partner of his firm, and the only legal descendant of the Carter legacy. The cameras flashed, the world watched, and when it was my turn to speak, I looked directly at the lens and said, "They built their world on lies. I'm here to burn it down with the truth." The grand hall at the downtown courthouse was packed. Journalists lined the walls, camera flashes pulsed like lightning, and rows of polished shoes squeaked against the marble floor as people shuffled to their seats. In the centre of the room stood a podium flanked by 2 tables, one for the attorneys, one for the family members. And I, Ashley Carter, stood between them, calm and unshaken. Daniel sat beside me, his arm resting lightly on the edge of his chair. His presence was thunderous, even in silence. On the other side of the room, my mother and Brittany whispered furiously to their attorney, their smiles brittle as glass. They still thought they could spin the narrative, charm the crowd, manipulate the outcome. But not today. The clerk called the room to order and the proceedings began. The will was read aloud first. Daniel's estate, valued at over 40 million, was to be transferred to one person, me. No trust funds for Brittany. No charitable clauses directed by my mother. Just my name in ink, witnessed and signed. I glanced over. My mother's face turned grey. Brittany's mouth fell open. She looked at me as if I were a ghost, clawing my way out of a grave she thought she'd buried. Daniel stood and faced the cameras. "Let me be clear. Ashley Carter is my daughter, both by blood and by choice. She is the sole heir to my name, my firm, and my estate. Barbara Langley is no longer associated with any property, title, or legacy under my control. That includes her current residence, which she acquired using money meant for Ashley's care. Effective immediately, her claim is revoked." Gasps echoed around the room. The journalists erupted with questions. Brittany stood suddenly and shouted, "You can't do this! She was never meant to be anything." But no one listened. Her voice dissolved beneath the weight of Daniel's words. My mother clutched the armrest, eyes wild. "You ungrateful little—" Security moved in quickly. They weren't being escorted out yet, but the message was clear. Their reign was over, and then it was my turn. I stepped to the microphone. The room fell silent. I was told my whole life that I was a burden, that I was lucky just to exist in the shadows of this family. I was told I was unstable, difficult, broken. But what they really meant was I was inconvenient. I saw too much. I remembered too much. I paused. They tried to erase me, but you cannot delete truth. And the truth doesn't need your love. It only needs your respect. The silence cracked into applause, not polite clapping, but sharp, stinging recognition. Some people stood, others wiped their eyes. I stepped down and walked back to my seat, heart hammering, not with fear, but with finality. In the days that followed, the fallout came fast. Brittany deleted her social media, packed a single suitcase, and fled the city. Last I heard, she was living in a rental outside Austin, working part-time and avoiding cameras. Her glittering life turned to dust. My mother was indicted for fraud and misappropriation of trust assets. The charges were stacked, and her reputation, once pristine in her little social circle, was now in tatters. Her tennis club revoked her membership. Her friends stopped returning calls. The woman who built her identity on appearances now faced the world stripped bare. My stepfather vanished. No farewell, no fight, just a trail of credit card debt and an empty guest room. Then a letter arrived in my mailbox, handwritten. No return address. Dear Ashley, I've carried the truth like a stone in my chest for years. I knew what your mother did. We all did. But she made it clear if we spoke, we'd lose everything. She threatened, manipulated, and terrified us into silence. I was a coward. I won't ask for forgiveness. I just want you to know you were never alone. We saw you. We just didn't save you. I'm sorry. I folded the letter and placed it in the box with the others. People kept asking if I'd ever speak to my family again. The answer was simple. I don't need reconciliation. I don't need apologies. I don't need them to love me. I just need them to remember who I am. A year after the trial, my name was no longer just attached to scandal or legal drama. It stood for something else: survival, clarity, justice, and most importantly, choice. I founded the Mirror Project, an organisation dedicated to helping survivors of familial gaslighting reclaim their voices. We provided legal referrals, therapy resources, emergency housing, and something rarer, validation. Our mission was simple. We believed people even when their families didn't. The first time I stood in front of a room full of women who had lived through the same emotional labyrinth, I felt something shift inside me. Their stories echoed my own: quietly erased daughters, scapegoated sons, manipulated memories. You're not crazy, I told them. You were conditioned to doubt yourself, but the fact you're here means your instincts are alive and strong. The media called it revolutionary. I didn't care about the spotlight, but I understood its power. The more visible I became, the harder it became for families like mine to hide. Psychology professors started contacting me. One invited me to speak at a university on the East Coast. Another asked permission to use my case as a study module for their course on generational trauma. One evening, I sat in a packed auditorium as a professor clicked through a PowerPoint slide. There I was, on screen beside the term Survivor Reframe Model. I didn't cry, but my palms warmed. Brittany resurfaced months later. Not in a tabloid, not in court, but in a podcast titled Unlearned. Her voice, subdued, filled my headphones. I was the golden child, she said. I didn't realise I was being programmed to hate my sister. Every compliment I got came with a comparison. Not like Ashley. I internalised that and I weaponised it. I want to say I'm sorry, but that feels selfish. The truth is, I don't know who I'd be without her standing up. I paused the audio, not because I couldn't handle it, but because it didn't need to be more than it was. Closure doesn't always come in a ribbon. That same night, a notification popped up on my phone. A direct message from a girl named Marisa. She wrote, "My sister sent me your story. I'm 17. I think my family is just like yours. I didn't know I could leave. I didn't know I was allowed to say no. But now I do. You saved me. Thank you." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied, "You saved yourself. I just reminded you you could." My life wasn't glamorous. It was quiet. I moved into a wooden cabin near a lake, 3 hours from the city. No internet most days, just me, a Labrador named Murphy, and shelves filled with second-hand books. I spent my mornings writing, not about my mother, not about revenge, but about systems, memory, healing. The kind of writing that could become a map for someone else, lost in the same dark woods. Every now and then I'd visit Daniel in San Francisco. We'd walk along the pier. He'd tease me for always bringing snacks for Murphy. Sometimes we spoke of the past. Mostly we built a future. Then came the letter, an official envelope, thick, embossed with a crest I hadn't seen in years. I opened it cautiously. It was from the school I'd once begged to attend, the one I'd given up to stay home and help the family, the one my mother said I was too unstable for, too poor, too selfish. They were inviting me back. As a guest lecturer. Subject: Trauma, Identity and Reclamation. I reread the offer 3 times. My hands shook as I folded the paper back into its envelope. Later, standing in front of a classroom filled with students, I began with a story. Not mine, but one familiar. Imagine a girl who's told she's a storm in a house made of glass. Every time she moves, they say she's breaking something, so she learns to sit still, until one day she remembers she was never the storm, she was the house. Silence, then pens scribbling, eyes meeting mine. I closed the lecture with a single sentence. My mum made me leave her house, but I made the world my home.